I've definitely felt, there are moments where you feel foreign, as in you feel otherized. It's sort of an out of place feeling, and I've definitely felt that way in both China and here. For instance, in China, I speak fairly fluent Mandarin, but there are obviously some cultural gaps. And when I'm out with my friends from international school, we're actually speaking English most of the time. And those are the moments where they suddenly, start asking us, oh, where are you from? Oh, are you Korean? Are you Japanese? Are you not Chinese? And then I have to answer back in Mandarin. No, I'm actually from here. I speak English at the time. And that just makes me think, why am I speaking English all the time with my friends who are also of Chinese descent, who also speak Mandarin fluently, but here we are speaking English.
I would describe myself as Malaysian Chinese, and I grew up briefly in the States for 4 years, but I moved back to Malaysia when I was 10 years old and attended an international school there and did the International Baccalaureate, which is a pre-university program up to the age of 18.
I was born in Philly. A month later, my family moved to New Jersey, Edison, New Jersey, where I grew up for 5 years. And then at the age of 5, I moved to Guangzhou, China because of my dad's job, where I attended an American international school. And I would come back to the States every summer, either West Coast, East Coast, anywhere, because I had family here or to do summer programs. So when people ask me where I'm from, that's the story. I'm American, I'm also Chinese. I take pride in both of those things.
According to the data in ISS Directory of Overseas Schools, 6 million adults from the United States and other developed countries have spent a significant part of their formative years in an international setting. David B. Willis has said that transnational culture can be defined as a shared pattern of learned, transmitted socialization generated from a setting characterized by multiple participants, languages, and ethnic backgrounds. They typically see themselves as belonging to a mixture of cultures as bicultural or multicultural rather than monocultural. They are also called third culture kids. They have lived outside their native culture or the country of their passport for a very long time permanently. The third culture refers to a created culture that is neither the home culture nor the host culture. It is the culture between both cultures.
I think in the ways we talk about privilege nowadays within an American setting, there's also a conversation to be had about the great privilege that I owned by being able to attend an international school and being part of that community, and the access that it offered me in terms of links to other people who were in similar communities that were international, and just even the socioeconomic affordability of being able to access these circles in terms of education and also people, like I mentioned, benefited me greatly and is not necessarily an experience that I would say many Malaysians at all have. It was very much maybe, I wouldn't say we were disconnected from the rest of Malaysians in general. I think in a sense, just the way the country works with its 3 races, Malay, Chinese, Indian mostly, and then expats, you become very welcomed and embraced by the culture in a way that's very non-Western. But at the same time, looking back, there was a segregation. Like you mentioned, the social pyramid. If anything, I think the international school kids had, that many steps up in terms of if you want to look at privilege as a ladder, we were many steps up ahead of other people from local schools who maybe had to work that much harder to try and sit for the SATs and learn English at a level that was above the national curriculum standard. And all these things were afforded to me because I went to an international school. I was still in Malaysia and I still lived there primarily, but the opportunities, even in terms of travel and meeting other people, were very big door openers for me.
This is not, smacking Hollywood or white media culture. We have to admit that the United States is sort of a media capital. You look at LA, you look at New York, these, TV and movies here sort of shape the world. It's just the nature of being so far ahead all this time. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then this, going to an international school where most of the teachers were white, created an interesting dichotomy within myself. There was the I'm Chinese, but then there was also the I want to fit. I want to I want to be able to talk baseball or talk movies and talk all that stuff. And part of the reason is that a lot of people just didn't end up, seeing films from everywhere else. It's sort of the same deal as I have a lot of Indian friends, for example, and they see Bollywood films a lot. They see Western films, but then they also see Bollywood films. But what they would talk about is Western films, because that's kind of the culture at these international schools, which made me sort of question it a little bit, because I'm thinking, here at an international school, wouldn't we be sharing more than just Western? Yes, it's English speaking, because English has sort of become the standard for international communication. Whether the merits of that are valid or not, out of the question. It's sort of the standard. But here I am at an international school with people from mostly non-Western country descent. I distinctly remember, when I was in second grade, this was 2 years after I had just moved from the United States to China, that we had a day called International Day, where everyone sort of dressed up in their cultures. And then, all the Korean kids would come in their hanboks, all the Japanese kids would come in their kimonos, Indian kids would, come in their sari and whatnot. It was a very, cultural celebration. And I remember one day where I was like, no, I'm American. I'm going to wear my USA t-shirt. I'm going to wear a USA flag. And then my mom just sort of like, she, for, part of my friend, she slapped the fuck out of me. She was like, nope, kid, boy, you are Chinese. She dressed me up in an old, Tang Dynasty, one of those Chinese suits, Tangzhuang. And I remember thinking that, no, I don't want to wear this. I'm going to look so funny in my heritage, in a piece of apparel and clothing that was so important to my heritage. But then I show up to school, and then I see everyone else dressed up in their own things, and that's when I was like, that's actually really cool. Why, I don't know why I had this mentality built into myself that, no, I have to be American, I have to be normal, I have to, do that. It's one of those instances where I kind of had to break out of the mold at the tender age of second grade. The internalized prejudice against my own history.
As tight as ever, but we're very spread apart. But we all always fostered this dream or this ideal that we would look to the West, go and take what the West had to offer in terms of education, resources, connections, and then one day in the future, when we had established ourselves and our careers, come back and put that all back into Malaysia and give back to the country and what we thought we could help with and what would benefit the growth of the nation, whether that was intellectually, economically, whatever it is, socially. So it's interesting in the sense that we looked to the West all the time growing up. And I think in that sense, there was always inherently, there is a connotation that the West is superior because that was our goal. And we achieved that. But at the same time, we want to take what we get from our experiences abroad and then plug it back in. So it's not a complete cutoff. It's not a complete, we're going to abandon our Malaysian identity and what we don't like about the country and all its problems as a developing nation and leave it behind. I think that has changed the process. The thought process has, of course, gained its own nuances and changes as we've actually experienced life abroad in these Western countries. But I think the overarching goal, and one that has really been a core ideal and a core value that has kept all of us together and in line, even though we're very different, has really been that. And it's very strengthening, I think.
According to a research done by Hong and Cho, our introduction of an alternative approach to culture takes as a point of departure a commonly reported experience which we call frame switching among bicultural individuals. While frame switching, the individual shifts between interpretive frames rooted in different cultures in response to cues in the social environment.
It's definitely the more individualistic versus collective. Back home in China, you can't. First of all, my elders come before me always. And that translates a bit here, when I see, the elderly, I'm always keen to help. But then sometimes my individualism bleeds into, my time in China where I'm, arguing with my mom because I keep going out and not spending family time, sitting at the round table with all the other family members. So I would say there are two modes, but I think just because I've been living in this state for so long and juggling them, that it's kind of become it's not so much like completely fused as much as it's kind of like a yin yang. It kind of curves into each other, and there's like a little bit in each, and they bleed into each other. But yeah.
I think a big mistake that people make a lot of times when looking to understand other countries or experiences is that race isn't always viewed the same way. History writes itself in very repetitive ways, for sure. We were colonized just as many other Southeast Asian countries were, but it's been very formative to look at, to be really thrust into the political nature of America currently, especially, and then to compare that to how racial identity and people are viewed back home and the differences in that, and how do I mediate between both cultures. I mean, there's this thing with code switching on a personal level where even when I meet my Malaysian friends, there's a difference between how I talk to them in Malaysia. There's a difference with how I talk to Malaysians who've been to other countries, who've studied in other countries, and there's a difference with how I talk to Malaysians who've actually studied in the United States and can understand the very specific struggles and issues that come with growing up and having to assimilate within an American culture as the perpetual foreigner.